Hey everyone, the next season's content update is live on the PTS and there are a ton of really amazing looking changes. Tons of things have changed. This is a complete overhaul to the game as you know it. So in this video, I'm going to be going over all of the new things minus the war gloves, which I did in the last video, that are coming in the next season. The first thing that we're going to be taking a look at is my personal favorite for this upcoming season, and it is the might and favor systems. So essentially, imagine season points combined with the current faction point system and you get the might and favor system. Anytime that you do an activity in a lethal area of the game, like the Black Zone, you will get these new might points. If you open up the new Conquerors Challenge in-game, you can see here there's tons of different rewards depending on how much points you get during the season, and then there's also a weekly chest. If you get enough of these points during this season, you get 3 different rewards: a battle mount, a fame buff, and an avatar. They start out at pretty low and weak rewards, but as you get more points, you can even get up to like a crystal battle mount. Now, by doing these same activities in the lethal zones, you can also gain season points for your guild. At the bottom of the Conquerors Challenge page, there is a personal stats page which shows you how many might points you've gotten in each of the viable activities, and if you go over to your guild page, you can see how much your guild has acquired for each of those activities, as well as how much you personally have contributed to each of those. Once these might points for your guild reach a certain threshold, you'll get season points for them. So you can see my guild's page here. No one had done any gathering yet for any might points or season points, so I went out into the roads and found some resources, gathered, and it both went towards my personal might and towards my guild's total might and season points. Really, this just looks like a really great solo player system to not only contribute to your guild, but also earn personal rewards and season points for yourself, and some season point rewards like the battle mounts for yourself by doing things only yourself, which is really great for all solo players. Next change we're going to look at is the open world mob changes. So mobs in the open world have been updated so that the longer they're alive, the stronger they get and the better rewards they give. These mobs are now separated into 5 different power levels. First is Recruit, then Soldier, then Champion, then Boss, and then finally Rare Boss. You can see in this picture what they look like according to each of their power levels. Another thing to note is that even at the super low tier, the weakest ones, the Recruits, their fame has been buffed significantly from what it was before. You can see here I'm in a tier 7 zone killing the lowest level mob, the Recruits, and they each give around 7.5k fame each, which is really insane. That's like as much as you get from a group dungeon mob. Here's me fighting a boss mob in the tier 7 zone as well. You can see they have new mechanics, they're a lot stronger than they were before, and they also give way better rewards. This tier 7 boss gave me almost 72k fame as well as 200 of the might points. The rare bosses are even more insane though. I found a tier 7 rare boss that gave me almost 290k fame, and a tier 8 rare boss gave me 380,000 as well as over 1,000 might points. These open world mobs are definitely going to be a good fame farming tool for solo players. On the theme of the open world, next we have the open world treasure updates. So they've changed the chests that are found in the open world. Rather than being found in static places and spawning at static times, they're now dynamic, spawning anywhere in the open world at random times. It seems like you can see them on the large map if you're within 1 zone away or so, and they are protected for a little while before you can open them. There are 2 versions, small and large. The small ones can go up to rare quality, where the large ones can go up to a legendary quality. As you can see, opening the chest gives you might points and contains some artifacts, some silver bags, and then some random items from the black market. Overall, they seem like their loot will be pretty good. Another open world change coming in this next big patch are big changes to resources and gathering. So first off, now randomly in zones, there can be treasure resources or little treasure troves spawning, essentially resource hotspots that spawn the highest tier resources for that zone, as well as having high enchantment rate. Along with this, tier 7 and tier 8 resource nodes have changed. So the previously large nodes for tier 7 and tier 8 nodes no longer exist, and instead only spawn in these treasure troves that spawn randomly around the map. For the small tier 7 and tier 8 resource nodes, they now have more resources per node, so tier 7 will have 9 resources and tier 8 will have 11 ticks or resources per node. Additionally, for these tier 7 and tier 8 small resource nodes, the amount of resource that spawns in them is randomized now, so it no longer will spawn with only 1 if someone just gathered it. It can spawn from anywhere with 1 to 11. To account for the increase in amount of resources you get, their spawn rate is a little bit lower though. Additionally, resource aspects have received a slight change. They can essentially now spawn in any of the zones that their resource can spawn in. So you can see here, we're in a sand zone where usually only the skin aspects can spawn, and especially in the skin nodes, but you can see there is an ore aspect just walking around this skin node. Another change coming to the open world comes in the changes to the static group dungeons. So the mobs in these dungeons have been given the same treatment as the ones in the open world, where they level up over time, but the group dungeon portals that were used to be inside the statics have now been removed, so it's only the mobs inside. You can see how valuable the mobs or how highly leveled the mobs are by looking on the map. If you're close enough, you can click on the static dungeon and it will tell you the current dungeon value. And occasionally they'll have an event that happens on a static dungeon which will cause the mobs to spawn and level at a much higher rate than normal. If you're close enough on the map, you can see it looking like this little glowing light on top of this static dungeon, or if you're inside it, you'll be able to see as well. Two other changes to these static dungeons is first that they have multiple entrances from adjacent zones to the static dungeon. So if you're like one zone away from the static dungeon, you can actually enter that static dungeon from that zone and will come in and out from that entrance. Second, the objectives inside of these static dungeons have been updated. They now show on the map when there's a chest or a boss spawned, so you will better be able to go specifically into the static dungeons and hunt down those objectives because you're able to see where they are. I tried to solo in 8.3 Masterpiece some of these static dungeons. I could barely kill one mob in the tier 5s. They're very difficult. I couldn't even kill anything in the tier 7 static dungeon that I tried. You can see here in the tier 5 static dungeon, when I killed one of these like mid-level mobs, it gave me around 25k fame, so that's about what you can expect if you are going to farm them as a group per mob. Unfortunately though, it doesn't look like soloing these static dungeons is going to be that much of an option. For really high spec players, elite levels have been added to Specialization, which allow you to go past 100. These bonus elite levels cannot be gained by normally just fame farming up mobs. You have to use fame credits to unlock them, and they cost quite a bit of fame credits and quite a bit of silver as well. You can see it costs around 50 million fame credits to get one weapon from 100 to 120. Now, it's also important to note that these extra 20 levels give the same IP bonuses as levels before 100, so 99 to 100 and 100 to 101 both give 2 IP to that weapon, and 0.1 or 0.2 to all other weapons in the tree. Along with these elite levels comes medals that you can showcase on your gear, so if you have an elite level, you get these little badges at the top right of item slots that shows that you are an elite level, and these medals level up as you get higher in the elite levels. Along with this, just very quickly to note, they also have buffed Satchels of Insight, so it's a little bit easier to fame farm up and a little bit faster. So along with the war gloves that I featured in a previous video, there's also one more new weapon coming in the next patch, as well as some minor balance changes and reworks. So starting off, the black hands have been deleted from the game. They no longer exist. Instead, it has been replaced by a new weapon called the Demon Fang. The Demon Fang's E shoots out in a little cone in front of you and does a bunch of magic damage, but also deals damage to yourself when you use it, and you can use it up to 3 times. The more you use it, the longer the cooldown will have, so starting at 10 seconds and going up to 20 seconds at 3 casts. In terms of the damage, it's a little bit higher than the dagger pair. If you use all 3, it will do around the same as the dagger pair damage plus bleed. However, it is an AoE, but it also does damage you. In my opinion, this weapon definitely has a lot of potential and will probably be pretty strong, especially in small and mid-scale fights. Quarterstaff's auto attacks have been reworked depending on if they're a bladed staff or a blunt staff. They both attack much faster now. Bladed staffs have this little 1-2-1-2 thing going on, just essentially doubled their attack speed. Not much going on with the bladed staffs, however the blunt staffs now have a 3-hit attack chain where they do a light, light, heavy, and the heavy does significantly more damage than both the lights. One thing to note with this attack chain, and the same as the Warglove attack chains, it doesn't like store up your heavy attack, so if you do light, light, and then walk around and don't do anything for a while, it will start with another light, light. The next time you go to attack something, it will not start with a heavy attack right out the bat. The leather helmets are finally getting a little bit of love with this Howl rework. It now interrupts spell casting, it casts immediately, as well as slows attack speed and still slows movement speed as well, giving it essentially making this ability a useful ability, which it has never been before, which is really amazing for leather helmets, giving them options. The Mercenary Jacket received a small nerf. It now no longer heals you from dot damage and things like that, only direct damage that you do to your enemy. Lastly, the Royal Boots also received a small nerf, removing the defense buff that they got after channeling. Last of the large open world changes, we have changes to hideout systems and power cores and energy crystals. I'm just going to briefly go over this. There's a lot that goes into this, but essentially there are now energy crystals and power cores that spawn in the open world. They're protected and like bounce you back for a while until they become unprotected, which allows you to pick them up and bring them to either your territory or a hideout, depending on what they are. Hideouts will be power cores and territories will be energy crystals to essentially buff them in some way or level them up. Now it's important to note with these that these will be a nice objective for guilds in their home zones and things like that, and once you grab one of these cores or crystals, you will not be able to mount up, making you very vulnerable, so people will try to gank you and stuff when you pick these up because it will show them moving on the map. Moving into some quality of life changes, there is some amazing quality of life changes coming in this next big update. First thing we have here is the party improvements. Essentially, this one is pretty small. It just has added some commands for joining parties, merging parties, and ignoring party invites. So you have the /join command where you can essentially ask to join somebody's party, making it easier for party leaders to pick people up. And then there's also the /invite command, which is pretty similar to what you would expect. It's the same as how you invited before. You can now just invite with a command as well, but this will also work for merging parties together. Lastly, there is the snooze command, which will allow you to temporarily disable all invites so people stop bugging you. The next quality of life update is a huge, massive, amazing quality of life update. They added loadouts a while back where they weren't super heavily used. Now they will be because you can automatically buy your loadout from the market. Super amazingly helpful. I'm so excited for this. Essentially, there's a new tab in the market where you can select a loadout and then it will show you all of the items, how much they cost, and how much that cost compares to the average for the market. And you can just straight up buy your entire set with one click or select certain parts of your gear that you want to buy. If some are too overpriced at the moment, you can just chill and not buy them. Another small quality of life change, we have a usage fee reworks. Essentially, crafting fees were a little bit weird and wonky sometimes, and they've kind of reworked it so that it is in accordance to how much nutrition that it takes to make the items. So essentially when you go to craft something, now this window pops up that you can open that will show you essentially how much nutrition it costs and how much it's going to cost you and why it costs you, how much it costs you based on that nutrition. Along the lines of crafting updates, we also have the rest towns getting a big overhaul. They're now much easier to live out of as they have a ton of new things. So they now have building plots where you can create crafting stations and things like that. They have an artifact foundry, they have an expedition master, and an energy manipulator. Essentially everything you need is now in the rest towns and you can fully live out of them freely. If you ever wanted to re-roll the quality of an item, it now has been updated and is made much easier to understand and much easier just to do in general. So it now shows you your percentage chance of getting each of the upgrades and allows you to do multiple at once, as well as return your items to your inventory only when they hit the certain quality that you want. So if you want a masterpiece gear, you can just select only return to my inventory with masterpiece and just spam that reroll button until it gets to masterpiece. Another thing to note is if you're familiar with rerolling before, there's a better chance of getting masterpiece when you had a normal quality gear than when you had, say, an outstanding, but now it looks like that's changed, and the higher higher quality your gear is, the more likely it is to be leveled up again to like Masterpiece or Excellent. A very small quality of life change that they've added is they've swapped the potion and food slots in your inventory to better represent how they appear on your taskbar, which will be annoying and confusing for us old players, but it is technically more intuitive. Okay, that is all of the larger changes. There are some smaller ones coming for the next season and next patch, but I'm not going to go over those in this video. I hope you're excited as I am for this next season, and if you want to see more content once the season does come out, make sure you subscribe because I'll definitely be putting more out.